Hi and welcome to my channel. Today we're gonna keep watching the Napoleonic Wars series from Extra History TV. And today it's Wellington's triumph. I guess his triumph at Vitoria 1813. And yeah, I guess this is in Spain. And I guess Napoleon's army might lose in Spain. Napoleon is winning in Germany, but his marshals are losing, so Napoleon overall is losing. Right? Yeah, original videos down below, and let's go. While the Allied armies had seized the initiative and were on the march, the French armies were scattered all over Spain.
May 1813.
That's probably true.
While Napoleon's Grande Armée began its fight back in Central Europe following the disastrous invasion of Russia, 1,200 miles away, at the other end of Napoleon's embattled empire, another enemy was poised to strike.
Let's just look at the map here, right? You can see that the French are scattered. But it makes sense sort of where they are scattered, right? So they're concentrated in Madrid, sort of, right? Because it's the capital. Makes sense. They have two armies on ports, which makes sense. To maybe repel attacks from British ships, makes sense. But you look at the Brits and Spaniards and Portuguese, they are concentrated in the north, right? They have some forces in the south, as we can see on this map, right? Maybe there's guerrillas in the French-held territories, that we know, right? But yeah, the Brits are concentrated for an attack. It looks like Salamanca, right? And I think this is before he attacks, and I think he attacks and gets them pushed to Zaragoza and Burgos, right? Like that line. The French get pushed back there, I think. Okay, let's see.
Previous year, Wellington's Anglo-Portuguese army had won a brilliant victory at Salamanca, but been held at Burgos and forced into a long, demoralizing retreat back to the Portuguese frontier.
Yeah, again.
But after a winter of rest, reinforcement and training, Wellington's army was stronger than ever.
Look at that.
100,000 men.
Wow.
Many of them battle-hardened veterans.
Yep.
And for the first time, he had sufficient cavalry and artillery.
Okay.
While transport and medical services had also been improved. Morale was sky high. Their chief, known to the troops as Old Nosey, was cheered wherever he went. I never saw the British army so healthy or so strong, Wellington informed London. In contrast, the French position in Spain was weaker than ever.
That makes sense that the British army, they're sort of new to the war as their own troops being in the fight, instead of paying and using ships. So their own troops are now experienced, right? While the French are, of course, experienced, but they have to rely on new, fresh conscripts, right? Which are not battle-hardened and are probably like teenagers, right? Like 18, 17, right? So this is looking like a recipe for disaster for the French. Let's see what happens.
Napoleon severely underestimated the threat posed by Wellington, and had just withdrawn 20,000 French troops for his own use in Germany. As commander-in-chief, King Joseph knew his forces were overstretched. Napoleon allowed him to give up Madrid and move his capital to the more easily defended Valladolid.
Okay.
But withdrawing further, to a strong position like the Ebro River, was out of the question.
Okay.
That would send the wrong message to neutral Austria and Napoleon's wavering German allies.
Right.
And so, with serious concerns, Joseph and his chief of staff, Marshal
In a few days we shall take the field. The campaign bids fair to be most brilliant. I hope to see the Pyrenees before September. Okay.
Wellington's plan was for his army to advance in 2 wings, concentrate at Toro, then move against Joseph's forces.
Makes sense.
In the south, Murray's Anglo-Sicilian Spanish force, based in Alicante, had just repelled an attack by Marshal Suchet at the Battle of Castalla. Murray would now mount a diversionary landing on the Mediterranean coast to coincide with Wellington's advance.
Exactly, that's what I thought why the French were on these ports. Of course, it's easier to transport supplies, right, from France, like Marseille, to Spain. But of course, the Brits have supremacy over the water, so it would be a dangerous mission. But okay, it makes sense that the Allies, the Brits, would do diversionary attacks and then attack up near Salamanca, right? Makes sense.
Prevent Suchet sending reinforcements north.
Yeah.
Wellington had also counted on large-scale support from Spanish regular forces, of which he was, since November 1812, theoretically commander-in-chief. But the Spanish Cortes, based in Cadiz, was deeply divided, with many still highly suspicious of British motives.
Yeah.
The result was that Wellington would only receive direct support from a few reliable Spanish divisions. Fortunately, he would receive considerable Spanish support from the guerrillas, now better armed, organized, and operating in greater numbers than ever before.
Yep.
A large area of Valencia had effectively been liberated by El Fraile, the Friar. Esposimina had captured major towns in Navarre and was currently keeping General Clausel's Army of the North busy, while Juan Martín Díaz, aka El Empecinado, was tying down large numbers of French troops near Madrid.
Makes sense. Farewell, Portugal. I shall never see you again. Wow.
On the 22nd of May, Wellington bid farewell to Portugal and began his advance. 4 days later, he was in Salamanca, from where he joined the northern wing of his army under Sir Thomas Graham. Joseph and Jourdan expected Wellington's main thrust to come from Salamanca, so planned to defend the line of the Douro River. But Graham's rapid advance north of the river meant they'd already been outflanked, and they ordered a retreat. By a series of brilliant marches, Wellington continued threatening the French right flank, forcing Joseph to keep falling back.
Okay.
Wellington's army was able to use small roads and mountain tracks north of the main highway, which the French had dismissed as impassable.
Wow.
But thanks to his Spanish allies, Wellington knew better.
That's good.
Backed by British sea power, he was also now able to switch his supply base from Lisbon to Santander, drastically reducing the length of his supply lines. Another feat the French had written off as impossible.
Why would they think it's impossible, though? Maybe because they thought they could hold them back so they couldn't get to Santander, but... Okay, the woods thing, I understand that there's small roads and you can't get a big army through there. Okay, that makes sense. That one, this one with supply ships, I mean, the Brits have supremacy over the water, so okay. Maybe they thought they could defend outside Santander, so they couldn't get Santander. Okay.
Ebro River.
Maybe.
The French found themselves outflanked yet again. And fell back to Vitoria.
Okay.
Here, Joseph decided that he must make his stand.
Okay.
The Zadorra River valley west of Vitoria seemed to offer a strong defensive position. Expecting an attack from the west, French forces were drawn up in 3 lines. General Gazon's Army of the South formed the first line. Then General d'Erlon's Army of the Centre. Then General Rey's Army of Portugal. Joseph...
Army of Portugal in Spain, in eastern Spain. Pretty interesting. I mean, this looks pretty... It looks pretty defensible. Like, you have the river there, but you never know. I mean, one bridge and they've crossed the river, and the river might not be that deep. It looks like there's like forest mountains on the French's left flank. Maybe it's passable. Maybe, I don't know. Do they have escape routes? It looks like they maybe have 1 or 2 escape routes to like France or go more south in Spain. But yeah, you just feel a sense of it's not right. I don't know what it is. Okay.
Hoped that he could at least buy time for the vast wagon convoy assembled east of the city to get away.
Okay.
It contained not only military supplies, but his government's treasury. And, as satirized by this contemporary British cartoon, the accumulated loot of 5 years' French occupation of Spain, including priceless works of art, jewels and antiques. He also expected General Clausel to arrive with 20,000 reinforcements any day. However, thanks to the guerrillas, Wellington was better informed of Clausel's whereabouts than Joseph himself.
Yeah.
Knowing
that's pretty bad for the French. You need to have communication. You need to know where your armies are. Yeah, these guerrillas are... They're causing havoc for the French.
Clausel couldn't reach Joseph before the 22nd of June. He decided to attack on the 21st.
Okay.
The day before, French patrols reported enemy troop movement to the north, so Rey's troops were moved to cover any threat to the army's line of communications. Apart from one division, which left to escort part of the wagon convoy to France. An odd decision that deprived the army of 4,000 men on the eve of battle. Marshals...
But I mean, it's not that strange to do that, because the guerrillas are... They don't know where the guerrillas are. They know where guerrilla mainly are attacking here in the northeast, right? But they could still... The wagons can just be attacked, right? So it is strange, but it also makes sense. 4,000? I mean... Yeah, you would need that. But okay, let's see.
Jourdan had been bedridden with fever that day. The next morning, he reconnoitred the army's position with King Joseph. They agreed that their position was overextended and should be shortened. But by the time their orders reached General Gazan, it was too late. He was already under attack. A sharp firing on the right gave us notice that the ball had been opened. Okay. Wellington, enjoying the advantage in numbers for once, had decided to attack in 4 columns across a 10-mile front.
That makes sense.
With General Graham's left-hand column threatening Joseph's line of retreat.
Use your numbers.
It was a bold plan, with the potential to trap and destroy Joseph's army, but required careful coordination and precise timing. Fortunately, the French had not thought it necessary to destroy any of the bridges over the Zadorra River, which was also fordable in several places. At 8 a.m., General Hill's column began its attack on the Allied right. Spanish and British troops advanced up the western heights of Puebla, driving off French skirmishers, and forcing General Gazan to send reinforcements to secure his left flank. Hill's troops then seized the village of Subiana, but French cannon fire and counterattacks prevented any further advance. Convinced that Hill's attack was the main assault, and that troop movements to the north were probably a diversion, Jourdan continued to send troops from the centre to reinforce the left. This was exactly what Wellington wanted. But
this sounds very much like Napoleon in Austerlitz against the Allies. What Wellington is doing. Wellington knows his enemy, sort of, right? He knows what his enemy is probably going to do, and he has made a plan for that, like Napoleon did at Austerlitz, right? Wellington probably knows that his enemy is probably going to attack his right flank, because maybe believe that is the That is the main army. Although Wellington has more numbers, so that's a little difficult. But it also makes sense on Joseph to actually be decisive to say, no, this is main army and let's attack here, right? That's also good. But when it's a trap, it will be very disastrous. Let's see.
11 a.m, he was waiting with growing impatience for his other columns to go into action.
Okay.
Lord Dalhousie's 7th Division, supposed to be leading the attack by the centre-left column, had got held up in the mountains. While further east, Graham's flanking move had got off to a cautious start.
Uh-oh.
But seeing the size of the approaching force, General Ray decided to pull back his troops across the Zadorra River.
Okay.
This encouraged Graham to get things moving. Colonel Longa's Spanish division advanced on Durana, held by Spanish troops loyal to King Joseph, and a bitter struggle for the village ensued. British and Portuguese infantry advanced against Gamara Mayor.
Wow.
They were soon engaged in bloody street fighting with the French. This scene shows an attack by the 4th King's Own Regiment of Foot and the 47th Lancashire Regiment.
Wow.
Though they succeeded in driving the French out of the village, they could not cross its bridge over the Zadorra, which was expertly covered by French guns.
Okay. Come on, ye rascals. Come on, ye fighting villains. Wow.
Around noon, a Spanish peasant informed Wellington that the bridge at Tres Puentes was completely unguarded.
Uh-oh.
He immediately ordered Kempt's elite light infantry brigade to dash across it and secure a bridgehead.
Okay.
But there was still little sign of Dalhousie's 7th Division. General Picton, the notoriously short-tempered commander of the fighting 3rd Division,
He just wanted to
ran
attack.
out of patience.
Yeah.
Fed up with waiting for Dalhousie, he ordered his men to advance.
This could be either decisive or disastrous. Right? He's attacking. He might just be completely destroyed. And it might actually sway the balance here, right? But let's see.
They charged across the Mendoza Bridge
Right.
and a nearby ford, driving back light French defences.
Okay.
General Gazan, with his left flank pinned down at Subiana, was now about to be outflanked on his right.
Yep. Okay.
And had no option but to pull back his troops.
Makes sense.
Wellington's army was now crossing the Zadorra River.
Yeah, they're
in force.
squeezing.
Heavy fighting continued to rage on the heights of Puebla.
Yep.
But here, the French also had to give ground to maintain the cohesion of their new line.
Makes sense.
Scottish Highlanders and Connaught Rangers, supported by riflemen and Portuguese troops, now stormed the village of Arigneth, routing the defenders, who retreated southeast. And a gap began to emerge in the French centre between Gazan's army of the south and D'Erlon's army of the centre.
I mean, Wellington has the numerical superiority here, right? So Wellington can just squeeze Joseph, right? And he can divide his army. Wow. This is this is epic to then want to see Wellington versus Napoleon, right? Let's go.
The advance continued, with heavy pressure on both French flanks.
Yep.
Wellington's army appeared to be building unstoppable momentum.
Looks like
with
it.
Graham's column poised to cut off Joseph's escape.
Artillery and musketry were heard in one continuous, uninterrupted volume of sound. The fire had already become
By 4 p.m., Wellington's army was formed up across the Zadorra, ready to strike a decisive blow. But his infantry came under heavy fire from 76 French guns, blasting great holes in their ranks.
Yep.
Allied guns were brought forward to provide support.
Makes sense.
The biggest artillery duel of the Peninsular War began.
Wow.
More than 70 guns on each side.
I mean, could you even
Allied
see anything?
skirmishers, exploiting the gap in the French centre near Gomecha, were able to work their way behind the French guns and shoot down their crews.
Wow.
Gazan found himself threatened on both flanks. But instead of trying to close up with D'Erlon to his north, on his own initiative he ordered a retreat that left D'Erlon's own left flank completely exposed.
Wow. But this is what, in Germany, I think it was with the Prussians and Austrians, or maybe Russians. They had the same situation, that they were surrounded and they were chased by Napoleon, and Napoleon thought that the Prussians, I think, would go like north and the Russians would go east, but they stayed together, right? So Napoleon couldn't divide and conquer. But this is the opposite. Wellington can just divide and conquer here, right? But Gazan looks like he was at the center and then he had to go back and back and back, right? He's almost at Vitoria. Difficult.
Around the same time, Longa's Spanish troops finally captured Durana, and rumours swept the French army that their escape route had been cut. D'Erlon's army of the centre fought on bravely, withdrawing to another new defensive line just 1 mile west of Vitoria.
Okay.
French guns kept up a steady fire on the advancing Allied lines, but once more, the position was outflanked.
Yeah.
Around 5:30 p.m., King Joseph bowed to the inevitable and ordered a general retreat.
$5 million were abandoned by the French and left upon the ground. Wow.
As the main road to France had now been cut by Longa's Spanish troops, the army would have to retreat east towards Pamplona along a single narrow road with boggy fields on either side. Bad enough for thousands of troops and guns, but there had been no attempt to move off the army's enormous convoy of wagons earlier in the day.
Wow.
The result was pandemonium, as military units and artillery tried to force their way through the streets of Vitoria and the congested lanes and fields beyond. The task of forming a rearguard fell to General Reyes' Army of Portugal.
Makes sense.
Which conducted an organised withdrawal covered by its cavalry. Wellington hoped that Graham's column would now be surging across the Zadorra River to cut off the French army's retreat. But Graham, overestimating the enemy's strength, continued to take a cautious approach.
Wow.
East of Vitoria, the French retreat descended into total chaos.
Yeah.
The single narrow road became blocked. Wagons that took to the fields got stuck and were abandoned. Allied cavalry fell upon this confused mass, spreading panic and meeting little serious opposition.
Yeah.
King Joseph and Marshal Jourdan themselves narrowly escaped capture.
Wow.
Among the abandoned wagons, many civilians, including officers, wives and children, priceless paintings, jewels and furniture, and more than 5 million gold francs. Troops on both sides broke ranks and dived into an orgy of plundering. One British officer described the scene. About dusk, the head of our column came suddenly on some wagons which had been abandoned by the enemy. Someone called out, "They are money carts." No sooner were the words uttered than the division broke as if by word of command, and in an instant the covers disappeared from the wagons and nothing was seen but a mass of inverted legs, while the arms were groping for dollars.
Wow.
For money it certainly was.
I mean, it makes sense.
The scene was disgraceful, but at the same time, ludicrous.
Yeah.
Wellington, however, was furious.
Sure.
Not only did the plundering delay pursuit of the enemy, but giant sums of cash, which might have paid for his army's supplies, vanished into private pockets instead. Of 5.5 million francs, only 250,000 were ever recovered by the army. Vitoria was a great victory for the coalition. Not as crushing as it might have been, reflected in relatively light French casualties.
Wow, really?
But in the chaotic retreat that followed, the Allies did capture all but 2 of 153 French guns, and even Jourdan's Marshal's baton.
Wow. You have sent me among the trophies of your unrivaled fame, the baton of a French marshal, and I send you in return that of England. The British army will hail it with
French military power in Iberia was broken. The Bonapartist Kingdom of Spain was at an end.
Yep.
Joseph returned to France to face his brother's criticism. Marshal Jourdan retired from active service. Napoleon sent Marshal Soult to replace them, but even his shrewd military mind could not turn the tide in Spain.
Makes sense. I see that Suchet is still at Valencia. That's pretty cool.
Attacks to relieve the French garrisons at Pamplona and San Sebastian were defeated.
Wow.
That autumn, Wellington began what proved an unstoppable advance across the Pyrenees and into France.
Wow.
In southern Spain, where Marshal Suchet remained undefeated, the disaster at Vitoria forced him also to withdraw towards the frontier.
I mean, it makes sense, even though he looks, all that we have heard of Suchet, I mean, he looks like a very good marshal, right? And I mean, he can't take on Spain and Portugal by his army, right? Like, or corps, right? That makes sense, but okay.
Leaving behind just a few isolated garrisons.
To slow them down, yep.
After a bitter 5-year struggle, the Allies had brought the Peninsular War, to the Spanish their War of Independence, to a victorious conclusion.
Yep. I don't see a way that Napoleon could have won in Spain. Right? It was this battle. First, Spain was on his side, and then he put his brother on the throne, and then after a while, the people of Spain didn't like him, and Napoleon invaded Portugal. That angered the Brits, so the Brits came there, right? And then it was this tug of war in Spain and Portugal, and I can't see Napoleon winning in Spain, and like there's no battles anymore or nothing like that, like he's winning against like Prussia or Austria or Russia, right? There's no concessions. I can't see that, but okay.
It had been a long, hard road, steeped in blood and suffering.
Massacres on both sides.
The alliance between Britain and Spain had been particularly treacherous to navigate. But ultimately, both nations had fought together with Portugal to drive the French back across the Pyrenees.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? The Brits and the Spaniards, like the French with the Brits, had it was always in history that the Brits allied themselves either with Spain against France or France against Spain, or the Habsburgs, right? Like France and Britain against like the whole Roman Empire or Austria, right? So it is a little, could have gone even worse. Like the guerrillas could have fought everyone. Could have fought the Brits, maybe not the Portuguese, but the Brits, the French, right? So it could have been even disastrous for the Brits, but it wasn't. Okay.
New research provides a clearer insight than ever into the huge attrition of French manpower in Iberia. An estimated total of 260,000 lives lost. 3/4 died of sickness.
That makes sense.
Of approximately 66,000 deaths from combat, 43% were in actions against Spanish regular forces. 38% fighting British-led armies, and 19% fighting guerrillas.
Makes sense.
By contrast, British military deaths are estimated at 52,000.
Wow.
Portuguese 15,000, with many more thousands of civilian deaths, while Spanish deaths are unknown, though the country as a whole may have lost as many as 500,000 lives in 5 years of war and occupation.
Because I mean, if the soldiers in the armies died of sickness, what was it? 3/4 of the deaths were of sickness. Then think of the civilians. Brutal.
For Napoleon, this disaster had been an unnecessary and largely self-inflicted wound.
Sure.
An intervention born of arrogance and false assumptions,
Yep.
with dire strategic consequences.
Yep.
But as the Napoleonic Empire crumbled in Spain, an even greater struggle neared its climax in Central Europe, where Napoleon faced the most powerful coalition of his enemies yet.
Yep.
If the French Emperor was victorious in Germany, Wellington might soon be scrambling back across the Pyrenees.
Maybe.
The fate of Europe was about to be decided at the Battle of Leipzig.
Wow. How epic was that? Now you just want to watch Battle of Leipzig. Wow. I like Epic History TV. They know how to build up tension, right? That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it was a self-inflicting wound, like they said, on Napoleon's part, right? He didn't need to get rid of the royalty, and he didn't need to put in his brother, but he did that. Yeah. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.